Marjorie Lohnes, who is the niece of Phyllis Scott. Marjorie, you certainly have been a barrier breaker in your life, starting your teaching career as a home economics teacher and ending as a supervisor of career and technology education for Carroll County Public Schools, along the way receiving the Distinguished Service Award for Secondary Education from the state of Maryland. You have said that Phyllis Scott was an inspiration and a role model for you. She certainly was a Renaissance woman who worked hard to improve her community. Phyllis was born in 1916 and lived through many challenging periods, including 2 world wars, the Great Depression, a global pandemic. Yet her outlook was very positive and forward-thinking. Can you share with us part of her background?
Well, Phyllis was born in Winnipeg, Canada, but then went to Wellesley College in Wellesley, Massachusetts, and was a part of the class of 1938. From there, she went on to be a social worker in Philadelphia, where she met my uncle, Robert Scott, and they later married in 1942. Bob was a graduate at Johns Hopkins University and an engineer. Then the war came, and he was off to the war, and she was working as the assistant director of the women's clinic at Johns Hopkins, and she was busy with her life during the war. And then
when he returned?
When he returned, they were in Westminster, came to Westminster, and she started her life there. She worked for the Children's Aid Society and worked there for a few years, and later volunteered for many more years in that capacity.
And she was very active in Association of University Women?
Yes, she joined various organizations, and 2 in particular were the Association for University Women and the League of Women Voters. So she was interested in those kinds of organizations.
Very good. What are some of her most significant contributions to her community?
I would say that I would think of 3 in particular, although there were quite a few things she was interested in. But first and foremost, I would say, was her interest in civil rights. She was one of the founding organizers of the Carroll County Human Relations Committee, and they were interested in desegregation and civil rights issues. And I would say that expanded into other areas, because that moved into interest in poverty issues, educational issues, issues of injustice, women's issues, anything that had to do with opportunity that people needed in the community. It's
beyond her interest in serving people who were poor and did not have the opportunities that others did. She also was very interested in the arts. And tell us about her tremendous work there in the community.
Yes, she was very interested in the arts, and again, a founding member of the Carroll County Arts Council, which that was in about the late 60s, I think 1969. And she was just, that was an emphasis she had with us as children. When all this was going on, I was in elementary and junior high school, so I didn't know about everything she did because my relationship was at a different level with her, let alone its significance. So she was exposing us to the arts a lot. Example, she took my cousin Julia and I to a ballet one time and out to dinner. It was quite an event. And she did various things with all of us. There were 5 nieces and 5 nephews. 2 of the nephews were her sister's sons who lived in Massachusetts, but we did have contact with them and would see them occasionally when they would visit. But the other 8 of us were often in her company, together and individually. So the
And-
arts were important to her.
And also, she left quite a legacy at Carroll Community College.
Yes, part of their interest in opportunities for people certainly included education. And for education, they became particularly interested in community college, seeing it as an opportunity for students that might not be able to go directly to four-year college, and because of the access to a community college. So they became early supporters and received a medal, I believe, in 1969 from Carroll Community College. So they were supporters there as well.
Can I
And
stop you for a second, please? Can you just say your line, and the arts were very important to her? Just repeat it.
And the arts were very important to her.
And then Lynn, be careful, when she's finished, like you interrupted and cut that line.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's why I'm having her repeat.
Thank you.
So let her take a pause at the end, like you just did now, education was like a period. Give a second before you start asking your question,
Got it.
for editing purposes.
Good. And I believe that the Scott Center at the community college is named for Bob and Phyllis Scott.
Yes,
Is that
that's correct. Yes.
Yes. What do you think led her to give back so much to her community?
That's a very interesting question, and I think that some of it was just her personality. You know, Bob and Phyllis were a team. They were quite a team. And they were by personality and temperament a bit different. Bob was quiet and Phyllis was vocal. And you know, she majored in social work. She was a social worker. So I think, you know, it's where her interests began and where they were and how she related to people. And so she was very interested in giving back. Bob and Phyllis had no children, so that gave them a time opportunity that often people with a lot of children or even a few children don't have that luxury. And so I think of the words access and opportunity. They looked for ways to help people have access and opportunities, and that included good housing, good jobs, good education, and they tried to work on those things. In addition, they found people that had similar interests, and they worked together with those people. And some of those people were decidedly younger than they were, and so they kind of mentored them and worked together with them, so they were hands-on in the projects that they did.
What do you think led her to be so active and give so much back to her community?
Well, I think some of the things that capture individual people's interests has to do with something that's inside them that we can't, you know, necessarily name. But we know that she became a social worker, so that was her interest in college. And so I think that tells us that she had an interest in people, and she had an interest in things being better and making good things happen. And I often think of the words opportunity and access, and I think about how she was eager to see that all people had opportunity for good education, for good housing, for good jobs, for a good life.
She was very instrumental in helping to get affordable housing in Carroll County, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Can you tell us a little bit about her work with civil rights on a broader scale?
Well, one example is, and again, this was something that I was not entirely aware of, nor its significance at the time because I was a child, but they met Martin Luther King for the first time in Baltimore at a church. And this was in the early 60s and before he was widely known, I believe. But then they were there at in Washington at the Lincoln Memorial at the I Have a Dream speech moment. So that was part of the activities that she was involved with.
Excellent. In the 60s, oh no, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say that. Forget that, okay? Her home was another example of her forward-thinking approach to life. Can you tell us a little bit about the home that she and Bob built here?
Well, they built a beautiful international style home. Most people would call it a modern home. It's unique and it's quite beautiful. They built it in 1953 and 54. The architect was Henry Heblin, and it started out that she was looking at a magazine and saw a house that he had designed and liked it, and then she later lost that article, and by coincidence, as they were trying to design this house, they ended up with him as the architect without really realizing it until later. At any rate, it's a lovely house. It's on the National Historic Register of Historic Homes, and it was a place of gathering for the family. There was nothing better than Christmas at their home. We looked forward to it, and while it was very close to where we lived, as children, you know, if it was too snowy on Christmas, maybe we couldn't get there. So while everyone else was wishing for a white Christmas, if it was the year to go to Bob and Phyllis's, you were hoping that you were going to be able to get there, because it was always a good time there.
I was impressed too with the learning the fact that she was sure that she had her own office in her house.
That's right. She had a very unique and compact minimalist office. Bob had a office on a whole different level of the house, and he was an engineer, so he was into computers and technical things, and he had a more suitable space for his interests, and she had the suitable space for her own. The house was well designed for their interests and their lifestyle.
What else would you like to share about this dynamic woman?
Well, Phyllis was certainly an interesting person. You always could have an interesting conversation with her. Again, there were 10 nieces and 10 nephews. There were 10 of us. There were 5 nieces and 5 nephews. And whether we were there individually or as a group, the conversation was always interesting. She wanted to hear about what we were doing. I would call her an encourager. She wanted to hear what our dreams were. She emphasized family with us. She emphasized education strongly, how important that was. She was a talented cook. She was a wonderful hostess, a gourmet cook. So she had many interests, and she shared her time and her resources generously with the community and with us, and was a rather unique person. She wasn't like everybody else she knew. And so for that reason, it was always interesting to be in her company and to be with her.